welcome to edition 89, part 2 of All Killa No Filla podcast with me, Rachel Fairburn, and Kiri Pritchard-McLean. Just before we start, we'll do our usual disclaimer. This isn't hero worship. We do this podcast because we have mutual interest in serial killers. As long as we are doing this podcast, it stops us from writing to them in prison.
I'm so aware there'll be such a different tone to this.
Yeah, I know. It's like you can tell that, I mean, we're recording this really early. You got in at God knows what time last night.
It's 1 minute past 7 and I got in at 3 last night. And I'm so aware of listening to you doing that disclaimer. It was like I was going to follow up and go, and Germany have declared war. We are officially at war. It's so grim.
It's that thing as well, like, you know, your voice is like an octave deeper when you wake up in the morning. I sound like a little boy trying to do a woman's voice.
Trying to get served at a bar.
Yeah, hello. Right, so this is part 2 because we didn't realise that part 1 would be so long.
Yeah, because it's an unknown killer. Although there's some suspects which we'll get into. Mm-hmm. We thought, we'll just rattle through this one, but there's lots to talk about. Yes. So, there's been a load of murders, including a weird murder that happens not on a night with a full moon. It happens on a Thursday instead of a Friday or a Saturday. It happens in the autumn, not the summer.
Shaking it up a bit.
Yeah, and the guy that they arrested, who is a peeping Tom, oh my fucking God. Oh my God. Right. Someone out there please invent something that can chemically remove your yawn? I know you can Botox your armpit so you stop fucking sweating. There must be something you can do where you can inject a part of your brain. And you know what? I don't care if I lose something else, like I can't do my times table. Just let me inject it so I stop yawning. It's such a waste of my time.
It is a waste of time, I totally agree. So, Peeping Tom.
Yeah. He's released because this murder happens and he is in prison and it's using the same gun. It's the same MO.
He's back on the peep. He's out.
He's back out there. My news. I bet he goes straight back to it as well.
Oh, of course he will, yeah.
So this takes us to Saturday night, June the 19th, 1982.
Yeah. So by this point as well, people were getting frightened as well because it was, being reported in the press a lot. Something very strange happens as well, just before we mention this murder. The murders we spoke about last time, which was Stefano Baldi, who was a workman who was 26, and Susanna Camby, who was a telephonist who was 24, and they were engaged to be married. Now, obviously, they'd been killed again, and Susanna's pubic area had been cut out. After these murders, of course, which were reported quite widely, and people were getting a bit scared, and people stopped going out, and, they were staying in at night, an anonymous person phoned Susanna's mother and said, I want to talk about your daughter. But a few days before the murder as well, Susanna had said that there was a strange man who started to torment her and chased her car.
Yeah. There's a lot of these strange men in the days leading up to these people's murders.
Yeah, which again, you could think it's something, but then again, as a woman, you think it's just an average day, is it not?
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
So the 19th of June 1982, this is where we've come up to, and here we go with my pronunciations. Paolo Mainardi, who was a mechanic who was 22, and Antonella Migliorini.
Really good.
She was a dressmaker who was 20. And they were engaged. They also had the nickname Vinaville, which is a brand of superglue because they were inseparable. Which is quite cute, isn't it? Depends how you say it though, innit? What tone? Vinaville. Oh, Vinaville, depends.
I think that's really cute. Maybe it's because it smelled like fish whenever they kissed. Like, there could be a really dark version of it.
Oh, it stinks, doesn't it? Super glue.
Is it Copydex, that stuff that smells of fish?
Yeah, and it absolutely fucking reeks, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think that is the glue that some drag queens use on their eyebrows. Oh, no, they use it as eyelash glue because apparently it's safe. See, this is not, obviously, do your own research, but I was backstage at a gig and there was a drag queen there and they were using Copydex, like that fishy smelling glue, on their eyelashes. And I was like, what are you doing? Why aren't you using eyelash glue? And they were like, it's the same stuff. It's just obviously like you can pay, £8 for a tiny, tiny little tube of eyelash glue, or you can pay £2 for a fucking massive one.
Blimey.
Yeah, there you go. Now, the reason they were parked in a fairly unusual place considering most of the Monster of Florence's victims, because it wasn't secluded. You could see the car from the street and people had driven past them and could recognise who they were, and it was them in the car. Now, they'd chosen this area, which was quite busy, had quite a lot of not footfall, but, you know, a lot of cars passing, and had sort of eschewed privacy because Antonella was scared of the Monster of Florence. She'd been reading about him in the news and was like, oh, let's just go here, he won't get us here, which it makes it all the more sad. Ugh.
Horrible. So, as you say, they're on a relatively busy road. Now, Paolo, when they were attacked, Paolo didn't die at the scene. He was actually just injured, but died later in hospital. And they said that Paolo probably saw the killer approach them, but they got stuck. They tried to drive off, but got stuck in a ditch in the vehicle. They think that that's what happened. Or, after the killer had attacked them, they think that the killer might have moved the car or something. But they were just discovered just a few minutes after the Monster of Florence had attacked them.
They think it was much more likely that he had seen the killer, started the ignition and tried to get out, but because the car was parked with its, like, the back of it pointing towards the street, so it meant it was basically tricky for him to try and get out whilst he was reversing. Now, it's shown that the bullet had hit Paolo while he was trying to drive away, so that's why they think it was more likely that he, like, the car was moving when the bullet hit him, basically. So they think it was more likely that he was trying to get away.
Horrible.
He got it to, like, cross the street, but it went straight over the street and then stuck in a ditch, and it couldn't move any further, which is so sad. So then he goes on, he shoots the headlights of the car so the lights don't attract attention. And they were both...
Not a bad shot, this guy, is he?
Yeah.
This is someone who's, like, clearly confident with a gun. I mean, shooting out headlights, that's got to take some precision, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think so, depending on how close you are, obviously. Now, they were both shot, but they weren't stabbed, and Antonella wasn't, mutilated.
He didn't have time, did he?
Yeah, that's it. That's the only reason they think is because he didn't have time to do it. And that it was a sort of unusual set of circumstances in that, he tried to drive off and nearly got away, and they had to he had to stop the car. So minutes later, if that, a car pulls up because they think, oh God, this poor car's stuck in a ditch and there's been an accident. So they get out and then they get there. And this is a case of lots of firsts. So it's the first attempt, the first time they nearly get away. It's the first time people aren't mutilated. It's also the first time that any of his victims are alive for any time. So Paolo is alive and is taken to hospital, but he was still breathing, but he gets to hospital and he dies very shortly afterwards.
Too injured to be able to give any information.
Now, at this point, they've got no clues, they don't know who it is, and they sort of decide they're going to sort of play with the killer in the press. So the prosecutor for this case is called Silvia della Monica, and they were investigating this, and they went, right, okay, we're going to try and work with the papers to put pressure on him. So she released a statement to the papers and said, tell them that as Paolo was dying, he could say a few words, and he gave us some information about the killer.
This isn't very ethical.
It isn't, is it?
No.
But I guess against who? Well, against everyone. Yeah. The whole idea was that this was a way of trying to get him to think, we're on to you and the net's closing, which, it does sort of work because it does provoke a reaction. So very shortly afterwards, an envelope arrives at one of the local police stations in Florence. Now, inside is a newspaper clipping of an article that goes all the way back to summer 1968. And it's about two lovers who've been shot in a parked car, and it was the crime that Stefano Mele had been convicted of all those years ago. And someone had written at the top of the clipping, why don't you take another look at this case?
Oh.
So the police went back, and obviously Stefano had been in jail for that, and they, for the first time ever, ran ballistics on the bullets, and they found that the shells of the bullets, they tested them, and they were from the same gun that had been used in all the murders around Florence in the 70s. The bullets were exactly the same. They had the same mark on them from that sort of faulty trigger pin, but also they're from the same box because they're so, bullets and things are so specific with their serial numbers and identification. Literally same make, same everything, same gun and same box. So this is well, it's really embarrassing for them because they thought, oh, this is easy. You've got, a husband who's confessed, said that he was a jealous lover, and it's done. And they were like, oh shit, yeah, we did sort of extract that confession from a man with a low IQ.
Hi, sorry.
Sorry about that. It's so bad, isn't it? Because it's the same thing that happens every single time. Oh, so they were like, what? This 6-year-old traumatised child didn't give us a perfect recount of what happened the night his mother was murdered in front of him. Jesus.
It goes a bit quiet then, doesn't it?
Yeah, but they don't accept that Stefano wasn't involved. They decide, okay, well, we're still right about that, but we think it's one of the Sardinians that was living with him, these 3 brothers. We think that he chucked the gun and one of the Sardinians was there and picked it up and is the one carrying out all the murders. So that was it. They thought, okay, well, we weren't totally wrong. It's one of these 3 brothers. So they started to investigate into them and what they've been up to, and they basically narrowed it down to one of the 2 brothers. So it's either Francesco Vincini or Salvatore, who was the eldest. And then something weird happened. So one of the brothers, Francesco Vincini's car, was just found near Tuscany, hidden in the woods. And they thought, is this because he knows that there's, because there's false information out there. They know that Paolo described something to the police, and was it that he recognised the car? So he decided to go and hide it.
Ooh.
And this meant that he was taken into custody on suspicion of being the Monster of Florence. So that is what's happening there. So, I mean, there's some active policing going on, but it sort of comes to an end on the 9th of September 1983.
Yeah. Now, this is 2 students who were visiting Italy. Wilhelm Friedrich Horst Mayer. So Wilhelm Mayer, who was 24, and Jens Uwe Rusch, who was 24 as well. They were German seniors at a Faculty of Fine Arts in Osnabrück in Germany. Now, they were in Italy celebrating because Wilhelm had just got an important scholarship. So they'd gone for a little break to celebrate. Now, they were... Obviously, these are 2 guys, we have to say as well, because that's relevant in a second. They were sat in a Volkswagen and they were shot while they were sitting in the car. Now, police think because Jens had long hair, as was the fashion at the time, this may have made the Monster of Florence assume that he was approaching a man and a woman. So this is the first gay couple that were killed by him. Now, the police suspected that they were gay because they found... I think this is a weird thing to report. They found pornographic material at the scene, which I think is kind of irrelevant. I don't think the sexuality is relevant.
No, it's not. And I always think with stuff like that, it's probably just one of those clicky pens where someone becomes naked. I think whenever, at this time, any time from the 40s onwards with crimes, if there's any sort of if they suspect you of being gay, they were and there was a dildo found at the scene, and you find out they've actually just got a rolling pin in their kitchen or something.
Yeah. But this is the thing, it's, again, very little to go on for the police.
Yes, but they do get some more information. So they've suspected for a while that he's tall, based on a few different things. The fact that he's got to be quite strong and quite robust to carry these bodies away from the scenes. The fact that they found a shoe print, which was on the larger side of things. Now, the crime scene tells them quite a lot about this killer. So the shots were fired from outside the van through the window. So the window shatters, but the glass didn't fall out, which means that the killer couldn't see into the van, so then had to go around the other side and shot in through the other window, and then got in the van to sort of finish things off. And only when he opens it up and gets in the van, he goes, oh, fuck, it's 2 men. And because the only reason he's killing is to carry out the ritual of removing, basically, the women's to do a full Jack the Ripper and remove all their genitals. So then he goes in and he's like, oh, fuck's sake. So weirdly, the shots gave him quite a lot of information, because if you think of VW camper van, which is what they're in, the windows are really high, and the bullet holes that were stuck in the shattered glass pane sort of tells you how tall the murderer must be, because they can work out, from holding his arm out and the trajectory of the bullets. So they knew that he was at least 5'10", but they're probably looking for someone who's over 6 foot. So they were like, oh, this is shit, because our main suspect was Francesco Vincini, and it doesn't matter how tall he is or anything like that, because he's in fucking prison, and 2 people have been murdered definitely by the Monster of Florence. So they're like, oh, for fuck's sake. So they think that actually the reason why he struck so soon was because he was following the case. He knew that the Sardinian brothers were suspects. He knew that one of them had been arrested, and he didn't want anyone else to take credit for his crimes.
Interesting.
I do think it's interesting when killers do that, when they're like, no, not... I mean, BTK did that, didn't he? Be like, not on my watch. It's sort of the reverse attitude that men have to using public toilets.
It's kind of a bit like I feel when I see a younger comedian clearly copying my stuff.
I know exactly who you're talking about. Like, people would say it's a form of great flattery, right? But
well, I've got to be honest. If you work in a creative industry such as stand-up, where your voice and your persona and your look to a certain extent are your main thing, if you haven't got your own, go and do something else.
Doesn't everyone start off by being sort of influenced by people they like?
No. Well, I didn't. I mean, you can be influenced by somebody, but you don't go on... I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of young men who think they're fucking James Acaster or Stuart Lee.
Yeah.
But that's because they're fundamentally boring young men who don't actually go on to have a career because they're just copying somebody.
Yeah, interesting.
But I feel, especially with women, I do feel at a point it's like, you know what, there's not as many of us as there are the men, and it's great that you like my stuff, but can you stop fucking doing me?
I mean, good luck to you if you're going to try and do me.
The one thing I've always felt about my stand-up anyway is that I never had that thing of like, oh, my stuff's like their stuff. I've always been very comfortable in the sense of like, I feel that only I can do what I do.
I don't even think they'll know how much they're copying you.
Well, someone needs to say something. Someone else needs to go, do you know what you're doing's the same as this? But fuck it, it's not going to last. By that, I mean I'll be dead in 20 years. So.
Do you know what I'm quite excited about is the male comedians who will have grown up watching female comics and how that will influence their work.
It won't. The men that go into comedy, 90% of them, I just don't think that is going to... It just won't happen.
There's a comedian I know, up-and-coming comedian, who's a guy, and his favourite comedian's Sarah Pascoe. And I think that's made... I think he's more interesting as a result of that compared to most young men doing comedy.
Do you know what I would like in comedy? I'd just like people to actually be funny. Because there is an absolute epidemic of unfunny comedians. I am not interested in a list of, like... I'm not interested in how special you think you are. Tell me a joke about it and make it funny. Because I think the comedy circuit, especially newer acts, has become so... Well, the thing about me, here's like a list of issues that I have. Here's how special I am, blah, blah, blah. It's like, tell us a fucking joke. Nobody cares. Do something funny.
I think it's them trying to zone in on their USP. And is it maybe just a reflection of the fact that lots of successful acts have talked about the stuff that makes them...
No, I think it's an absolute reflection of the narcissistic nature of society. I think these are fucking people that have, been obsessed with the phones, been obsessed with themselves. In general, usually a middle class with no fucking outside interests other than themselves. And this is absolutely coming through in stand-up. And the fact that, now it's even worse if you're a working class act, to try and even get into comedy again has become 10 times harder because of the expense of things. And I just think we're going to end up with a collection of like, oh yeah, so, yeah, I'm this, and basically that, and I'm boring. Tell us a fucking joke.
Hannah Platt has a fucking exquisite joke about that.
It's about time that these people, these indulged children, just because you're the funniest one in your tedious family, does not a career make. And I just don't understand why you'd go into an industry there's so much freedom and so much creativity. When you haven't got an ounce of creativity, just because you made a fucking pasta picture at school once does not make you a creative.
Well,
so go and do something else.
But they won't, will they? Because they also think that, like, because there's so much of, like, success in comedy, in inverted commas, is only, like, gifted to a very small percentage of people. They think, well, for a start, they can be sort of bankrolled into sort of, like, just getting by. And they will look around and see brilliant people finding it really tough and not getting the breaks that they deserve or in a timely fashion. And they'll use that as sort of like confirmation that they should still be doing it. Does that make sense?
Well, I'll tell you now. I mean, you'll spot these people as well because they're middle to upper class. They only ever do new material nights. Right? And are constantly previewing a show. Go and get a job. You are not good enough to do this. I don't want to hear your thoughts.
I've got an irrational bug, but I mean, I'm trying to be more zen about it and be like, how does it affect you, really? It's more that I get annoyed that they take up the space for new acts that would be really useful for, but, you know, is when they talk about doing the circuit, and I'm like, I have never seen you in a weekend room.
Yeah, exactly.
They just mean they do gigs, which is not quite the same as... The circuit is... I think when you're talking about the circuit, you're referring to a certain set of, like, 40 gigs.
But the thing I will say, and my last thought on this, like when Jerry Springer used to do a final thought, is that I know I bang on about being working class, but until things change, I won't stop banging on about it. And I still feel to this day that I do get treated slightly differently because this industry is still so middle class. You know, they can put someone with an accent on the TV, but they're not working class. I feel I still get treated very differently. I feel that being both a woman and a working class one, I don't get the respect for my stuff from the industry and from my peers that I should get. I think I'm still treated as that old thing of, oh, that northerner kind of thing. And I just think it's never going to change because the gatekeepers in this industry are still fundamentally, mostly middle-class posh boys. And I've said it, and it's out there. And do I give a fuck anymore? No, I don't. Am I a woman with nothing to lose anymore? Yes, I am.
The most dangerous kind of woman there is.
Oh, I don't give a fuck anymore.
No, I think you're right. And I think, I mean, people like me, in many ways, are the problem that they feel like they're getting some working class because they think that I'm thick and bawdy. So they go, oh, she must be working class because she's also got a fairly indistinct accent that's probably northern. But
then, on the flip side of it, if you are working class, you know, you can be Kevin Bridges or Jason Manford or whatever, you know, that or Mickey Flanagan, great. You know, I think the only exceptions is Sarah Millican. But I do feel as a working class person, if you're a woman especially, you can't just be funny or different or interesting. You got to have a sob story. You're not allowed to just be. It's like, oh, and did you claw your way up and go to Oxford in the end because we'd really like that? Or, you know, did your parents like sadly abandon you and not love you? Well, no, actually they're fine and they're still together. Oh, we kind of don't like that. Did you start smoking when you were 4 years old? You know, that kind of shit. You're not allowed to just be. You've got to be their version of it. And I'm going to talk about this in my show as well. And it fucking gets me down, and it never changes. It's so bizarre. I can't remember how I got onto this rant.
Yeah, I don't know either, but it's interesting.
Yeah, and also don't get me started on the right kind of northern either.
What do you mean?
You've got to be the right kind of northern. And I'll say this as well. There's some northern comedy out there that's absolutely not making it easier. You're playing into the industry stereotype, a middle class stereotype of what they want northerners to be, and it makes my fucking gut churn.
When it's like, we're just simple folk. But
yeah, what would we know? We're from north. Oh no, I hate it. I fucking hate it. Have some pride, will ya? Anyway. Back to the murders.
So, the investigating judge, who was Mario Rotella, had sort of convinced himself that it was one of the Sardinian lads who had done it. And he was like...
one of those Sardinian lads.
Yeah, he was like, listen, I really think it's one of those, so I want you to go and investigate this properly. So they released Francesco, obviously, because he wasn't the murderer. So they think, okay, well, that just rules one of the brothers out. So they arrest the other suspected brother, which is Salvatore, and they arrested Giovanni Mele, who's Stefano Mele's brother. And they also arrest his brother-in-law. Well, his brother-in-law is brought in for questioning. That's Piero. Now, they had basically, all of these men had been mentioned at some point when they were investigating and interviewing Stefano Mele. But also he'd mentioned loads of people and was really inconsistent and all over the shop. And it was in 1968. So, you know, it was absolutely years ago, and he'd been in prison for a while now. Now they thought, right, okay, well, these men all have motive because...
I'll be honest, I'm surprised they didn't arrest a 6-year-old at some point.
Yeah, well, this is it, isn't it? They're just sort of like... It's quite a scattergun approach, no pun intended. So they thought that they would all have motive because by sleeping around, Barbara would have brought shame on the family, and it would have been a regular embarrassment, and it was happening on a weekly basis as well. So they thought, okay, well, that's the motive to have her bumped off. And they thought, well, they must have this gun then. So this is where they're up to with the suspects. And then it's just under a year till the next murder.
Yes.
So they're trying to get some evidence on these guys, but nothing is happening. And then we get to
29th of July 1984. This is Claudio Stefanice, who was a law student who was 21, and Pia Gilda Rontina. She was a barmaid and cheerleader.
Love it.
She was 18. Now, they had gone to the woods near Vicchio, and they were shot and stabbed there as well. Now, this is where he really goes to town on this one, because it's been over a year since he was able to do this. And he removed Pia's pubic area and her left breast as well. Now, again, in the day of the murder, there was reports of a strange man who followed the couple into an ice cream parlour. And Pia had said as well that she was being bothered by an unpleasant man at a bar that she worked at. But this guy that was at the ice cream parlour, apparently the person that worked there recognised the couple, and he said that this man arrived at the same time as them, sat down while they were eating their ice cream, and he was watching them, and then as they left, he left as well. Very odd.
And they were killed shortly afterwards because of what was found in their stomach as well.
I mean, I wonder if there is some truth in that one, because he can't just be showing up at these places, like, just as, you know, oh, I'll just pop here and see what's happening. There's got to be some element of stalking, I think, in this.
Well, not if they're going to... I mean, they went to... they had a usual spot in this this little district near Florence, which was sort of like in a woodsy area, and they would go there regularly. So if you were a peeping Tom and you knew where couples used to frequent, you could just bide your time.
Yeah, I suppose so.
But yeah, I don't disagree with you, but I also think it's possible that he had just played a very long waiting game, and he could have been very unlucky for, 6 of those months, and no one came to that spot, and then, he couldn't get a good view, or there were too many witnesses, and I think that's why sometimes there was long gaps between.
Yes.
The Sardinian brothers are all in police custody at this point, and they're like, oh, motherfucker. Another murder has happened that's definitely by him, and all our main suspects are in prison.
And I bet they're like, woo!
Yeah. But there's some clues left behind at this crime scene. So there's a handprint on top of the car that the killer left. So they think basically he had his gun in his right hand and then put his hand on top of the car and his left hand on top of the car and then bent down. So they were like, right, well, he's right-handed, and also... we think that he's tall because there were some knee marks at the side of the car, which they worked out that's him kneeling down to get Pia's body out of the car. So he's got to be heading for 2 meters. So again, like a tall guy. So they've got more clues, but also their main suspects are out the window. So they're not actually any further forward. And then it's like another year again.
Yeah, it's another year. This is September 1985. 7th to 8th of September, so it's one of those.
Do you think as well, as people are getting more cautious, if he's opportunistic and he just sits and he waits in the dark, do you think that the fact that, there's rumours of him being around would have played against him because people would have been...
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Like, taking fewer chances. So that's why we're seeing the murder rate drop off in a way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people would have been terrified Especially when you consider it's young people.
Yeah.
And I think young people, I guess it would have been kind of become that thing of it's true, but also it's become like urban legend as well. And it's like, oh, we're not going to do that because of the Monster of Florence kind of thing. Well, so I think definitely people would have been taking less chances. Fewer chances.
Yeah, the couple he's about to kill, and the couple he's just killed, and the couple, well, the guys before, assuming they were a couple, were all tourists. And they think that is because locals were not going out anymore.
Yes.
And they didn't go to isolated areas. So this is why I think he didn't... I'm not saying he wasn't the weird guy that they encountered in the times before, but I don't think it was as premeditated as that. I think he used to fucking sit in the bushes and wait when he had time and opportunity, and I think that he was getting unluckier and unluckier because locals were not going and wanking each other off in their Fiat 500s anymore.
Well, this murder was a French couple. This was Jean-Michel Kravitchev... Oh, God, I can't read my own writing. Kravitchev.
Yeah.
Because my handwriting here is just tapered off at the end, as if I couldn't be bothered, He was
something
25 years
foreign.
Old. Yeah, I can't be bothered.
What's the French? Johnny Foreigner. That's horrible, isn't it?
Mr. French. He was a musician, and his partner, Nadine Moreau, she was a tradeswoman. She was 36. Oh, how French. He was 25, she was 36.
Oh my God, I bet they had fucking banging sex. Do you know what I mean? Like, a 36-year-old woman really... although, I think, when people are like, oh, whatever you want to call it, being a cougar or something like that, and they're like, oh, I'm having sex with a 23-year-old guy. I'm like, I literally can't think of anything worse than a fucking idiot who doesn't know what he's doing, banging away on top of you, and it lasting longer because he's got more energy. You've slept with a few younger guys, though, haven't you?
Well, I mean, I don't really want this on the pod, but what happens is you don't want to be in a conversation with somebody where eventually, you've got nothing to say to each other, but then it'll be like, oh, you stand there, let me see if I can kick higher than your head. Bye-bye.
I don't think I'd have the patience.
Pokemon?
Yeah, that's it. I don't think I'd have the patience for... I mean, barely have the patience for men anyway, but I don't think one with either enthusiasm or, one that doesn't remember the fucking gummy bears.
Yeah. Do you know what? People in general, until you've had your heart broken, don't come round here wanting some conversation with me. You have never experienced anything in your life. Until you've had your heart ripped out and you've been devastated by something, then you can come and talk to me.
You heard it here first, guys. You want to turn on Rachel Fairburn, you need to have fucking trauma.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that can get her wet these days, is a huge, life-changing event. Sadness is what gets Rachel wide.
But honestly, don't be doing stand-up about it, because
fucking hell.
I will dry up. So don't. Take your trauma and see a therapist. Don't take it on stage, please.
Push it down, push it far down, so it makes your dick hard, and fuck her with that. That's what she wants. She wants a trauma boner.
Now, they were lovers from France, is the next thing I've got written here. They were on a camping holiday. Cannot imagine anything worse. Again, like you say, they probably didn't know about it not being safe to be... They were in a camper van, I imagine, were they? They probably didn't know it was not safe to be in certain areas.
There were warning signs up and danger notices all around Florence. Ooh. And they gave out flyers and things to be like, listen, there is someone operating in this area. But, it also depends what language it was in, and, like, are you really going to pick up a pamphlet? If they're just sort of doing their own thing, I can see how the information would pass them by, because it's not like they'd be doing what we would do and do a quick Google of, like, good places to go or visit, But
also, I guess you're on holiday, you're not even... You're just having a nice time. You're not thinking of... You think less about your safety sometimes, don't you, when you're, having a good time. Now, they were attacked. They were stabbed to death. And, of course, Nadine's corpse was mutilated. And because they were on holiday and, nobody knew them, there was no missing persons report put out about them.
Which is a shame.
So the killer, he sends a letter to the authorities, which was like his, hello... Excuse me. And not only does he send the letter, He sends a piece of Nadine's breast as well.
Fucking hell. And it's sent to Sylvia Della Monica, who is the prosecutor who had put the information out in the press in 1982. Do you remember the whole, like, Paolo said something as he was dying. Now, with this murder, they're basically attacked in their tent, and they nearly get away. Jean-Michel was really, he was 25 years old. He was very sort of fit and healthy. He was actually a trained sprinter. So the Monster of Florence opens the front of the tent, and obviously they're like, what the fuck? And Jean-Michel just bursts out the tent and tries to peg it. I always want to say, my partner, when he says peg it, he always says old school, not new school.
That is a good point. Peg it means run fast.
Yes.
For anyone that doesn't know.
Yeah. So he runs very quickly out the tent. Now, he had been shot, but it had sort of glanced his arm. But this is so shit. He runs off through the woods and is obviously really fast, but he runs... I don't know which direction he turns, but let's say he turns right, and then he runs deeper and deeper into the woods, where eventually the Monster of Florence tracks him down and stabs him to death. If he'd have turned left, he would have gone maybe 100 yards and he'd be on the road and he'd be straight into the town.
No. I hate that.
I hate it when people nearly get away. It's so... when you make that split decision, and that would be me. I'm like, of course I've run the wrong fucking way.
Oh, horrible. Horrible.
This envelope with Nadine's breast in it, it had that classic when you cut the letters out of the newspaper, like a ransom note. So the address was written, with bits of letters cut out of newspapers, but there was a spelling mistake. So Republica was spelt with one B when actually it has two. So they were like, oh, okay. This is a very commonly seen word. Lots of people would know how to spell it. So this person, therefore, has probably got quite a low IQ. But maybe he was just reading something that didn't have lots of B's in it.
Or maybe, I don't want to stick up for him. Maybe it was just one of those things. Sometimes you just spell something wrong and you go, oh, I've spelled that wrong.
Yeah, or you couldn't fit it all in. Yeah, so they read quite a lot into this.
Maybe he'd seen a campaign about saving the bees.
Very good, Rachel, really good.
A lovely Radio 4 joke there. You're welcome.
Get you a girl who does both. Now, there was no letter or message, just a piece of Nadine in there. Absolutely awful. Ugh. Now, the French couple were the last victims to be killed with this .22 caliber. Ugh. The police thought at the time, okay, this envelope is been sent by the killer and was his way of going, it's going to escalate. I'm going to get more violent. But now they think, oh, it was a goodbye note.
Yeah, I don't even know who to think this was, I haven't got a clue. There was a chap called Pietro Pacciani who was investigated on the 16th of September 1985. There was a letter that sent to the police saying that they should interrogate him. Now, he'd served time for murder anyway, hadn't he? And he was a farmer. Someone said that maybe it was him, said he's a sharp shooter. He served 12 years for murdering a 41-year-old man who was caught with his girlfriend. But that was it. There was nothing on him. And in 1991, police searched, his house and found a soap dish and a drawing pad that they were like, oh, these possibly could have belonged to the victims. That's fine, but there are body parts that you could be looking for, or, I don't think he's going to be taking a soap dish and a drawing pad. But on the 17th of September 1993, he was arrested and there was a trial. He was given a life sentence, but then in 1996, he was acquitted and released. Based on some evidence that they found a bullet in his garden. But they said, oh, it's doubtful he used this in the murders. And then in 1998, he died of a heart attack. So, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, there's lots of reasons why it was really, really hard. Because they are asked that the magistrate, Francesco Fleury, who had been working on the case in 1985, was asked, why have you not caught this incredibly violent killer? But there was just a lot of sets of reasons that they'd worked with a forensic psychologist for a profile, and they were like, this guy works on his own. So, which makes him much harder to... If he cracks, that's the way we find the case. But other than that, there's no one else to have, a pang of conscience or to be a witness. he picks people he has no relationship with, which makes it much harder to sort of find. You know, you could trace it back if they all went to the same school or something like that, but these are deliberately picked to be random, and they're chosen for convenience, that they happen to be in the right place at the wrong time. The murders are carried out in less than 10 minutes. So that is, again, massively narrows down the window of when the killer is going to be spotted doing those things, which is like, if most of them are 10 minutes from shooting them and mutilating someone. They also know that he's much better with a knife, or more comfortable with a knife, than he is with a gun. They think he's got no stable work, so again, that will be much harder for people working with him to pick up a pattern or notice that he was late or tired or there was blood on his collar or anything like that. They think he worked in manual labour, was probably in his 40s in about 1985. And they thought, this guy lives alone or with an elderly person who isn't going to notice when he's going in and out. And
well, like, old people don't fucking notice anything.
Or they go to bed early.
Fucking hell, listen, I lived with my grandparents. My gran noticed fucking everything. Don't you worry about that. Fucking 91 years old, knowing everything. Nothing passed her by, don't you worry about that.
They think because he's one person and they're so sort of frantic and powerful and quick and manic, these murders, that he might have been hammered or on drugs to sort of build him up to do it. They also think that might have tied into the fact that they thought he was impotent, hence the olive branch.
I mean, really, if you're off your nut on drugs, can you... I suppose it depends what drug. But to be off your nut and do that still takes... I think you've got to be stone cold sober.
Well, I think it could be a combination of him planning meticulously, because that is something they were like, this is someone who regroups and then plans, and then you're on coke. So you can carry out your plan efficiently, whilst talking about yourself, obviously.
Yeah. while telling everyone about the great business idea you had.
Yeah, I was going to say pitching a telly idea, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, it's difficult for them. The area that he strikes in around Florence is huge, the countryside around Florence, and there's not a big infrastructure, there's not street lights everywhere. He goes to dark, heavy wooded spots. And there's never been a witness. Never, ever. Which means he waits till there's no one around.
Yeah. So he's familiar with the environment.
Yeah.
And they think that when that was a big gap between the killings, he was just away. Or in prison, possibly. We don't know.
Yeah. I think he's really unusual because they did all the traditional investigating, like, okay, a woman has been killed, let's speak to her partner and her ex-partners. And they said so much time doing that, the actual killer would be getting further and further away because it was deliberately random. Now, we talked about Pietro Puccini. He does go to trial for it because he had abused his wife over the years and he had raped his 2 daughters, and he'd been to jail for those between 1987 and 1991. So,
and a murder.
Yeah. So this is one of the first cases that they use a computer to sort of cross-reference using an algorithm to be like, okay, who's got these crimes? So it's quite a landmark case in that way, that they cross-reference. And he was on a shortlist, Pietro, and he was questioned about it because they found out also when he was 26 years old he'd stabbed a man to death. But they thought because he's older, well, they must have been working with someone else, because he also had a really bad temper. He used to fly into a rage and was a very, very violent person. Yeah, I also did loads of absolutely fucked up stuff. He used to feed his family dog food, so the food bill was lower, and was just really tight. And he was also known to be a peeping Tom.
Sounds a great guy.
Well, yeah, one of them is he was also a self-taught artist and poet. In many ways, the worst things I've listed so far. So they thought that basically that this would, the fact that he was sort of artistic, but also like really driven by his id and really sort of like animalistic, that this might be exactly what they had going on here. But that was it. There was shaky circumstantial evidence, but they still found him guilty in 1994. And there was huge pressure on the trial. It was broadcast on national TV, and there was loads of pressure on the police to like find this man and arrest him. And they were like, okay, well, let's make this man fit the fit the thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but then it was overturned in 1996 and he was let free because it was circumstantial evidence. Now, this year, there was an article about it. The relatives of 3 of the victims, including the French couple, have basically said, go back and hold a new investigation. So they released a statement that says, we're looking for the truth with the new investigation, and we're convinced that there are elements in the old case files that were wrongly overlooked. So this lawyer represents the eldest daughter of Nadine, and a few of the other couples. And there's another one who represents Carmela Denuccio and a few others. They're basically the murders in 1981. And they've asked, right, we need the case file and we want to go through Pietro Paciani's file because we still think it's him. So it's still going on. Literally, this article's from March 2022, which is only 2 months ago.
Well, there's another theory of the anonymous Florentine. It sounds like a random cake.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Something from Patisserie Valerie.
So this person sent letters in the 90s to the prosecutor's office, lawyers and the papers with stuff about the killings, which he seemed to know stuff that nobody did. But, I mean, sometimes I think that people involved in the case do things like this for a little bit of a thrill. There's got to be some weirdos working in the police, as we know. And then people are saying the weird sightings as well, the guy that was seen in the bar that Pia worked in, and the person that was watching the couple eating ice cream, and the person that was chasing the car, things like that. They think maybe this is all to do with the anonymous Florentine. But, I think whoever it is dead.
Yeah, I think so. There is DNA on some of those anonymous letters, male DNA. So they want to run that, because also they think it might be one of Pacciani's friends, a guy called Giampiero Vigilante.
Really?
Yeah, it's genuinely spelled Vigilante, because the police did search his house because they thought that Pacciani would have worked with an accomplice, and they searched this guy's house and they found loads of newspaper cuttings of the killings and bullets that were the same make used in the murders, but we know it all came from a specific box, so I think unless you're finding that box. So they want to reinvestigate it, some of these lawyers, and basically reinvestigate all the suspects thoroughly. But this guy, this Giampiero Vigilante, he's 90 at the moment, so I think they just want to test his DNA. But, it's really sad for the family, but I don't anticipate them having much luck.
No, I don't think so. I genuinely think whoever it is has probably been dead for a while.
Yeah. That was the Monster of Florence, who is very interesting considering it's an unsolved case. There's quite a lot to talk about.
I know, I'm quite surprised. Thank you for everyone who's listening. I don't feel like I've been particularly funny on this one, but that's life, isn't it?
It's all right, mate. It's also a true crime podcast. Take some
pressure
off yourself.
That is true, yeah. I do have to remember that sometimes. I have that thing of, I don't know how some comedians, when people don't get a laugh for ages and are quite comfortable with it, I'm like, oh my God, kill me. I feel like that in general life as well. Sometimes I'm like, why is nobody? I feel everything's too serious. Please, somebody, can we just break the relentless tension of life, please?
I think you just cringe too quickly. That's what it is, and too profoundly.
Yeah, I think that's true. But thank you to everyone who's listening. Thank you to everyone who donates to the Patreon. Thank you to everyone who has bought tickets to come to our shows. But also, thank you to everyone who's bought tickets for the big Edinburgh All Killer, No Filler summer special. I don't know why I said that. That's not a thing. But I'm going to start calling it that. I'm going to own it. We are in Edinburgh on the 16th of August with a late night show, with the last show in the venue, so we can ramble on for as long as they let us, really.
Yeah.
And it's on sale now from the Pleasance website.
Yes.
Go through there rather than the Edinburgh Fringe website.
Yeah, I think we've spoken about that before. How much we do hate that. So you can see Rachel's show. You're about 5 o'clock, right?
20 to 6.
20 to 6. And I'm 7:05, and then you can come and see ours. You've got time to have dinner and food between all that. And if you want to come to either of our shows on the 16th or the day before the 15th, book soon. And the 2-for-1 days and the 9th and 10th are very busy for my show. Also the 23rd for some reason. I don't know, maybe it's the last Saturday, I assume, but it's
I haven't even looked.
Busy. Oh, me, I'm a fucking I feel the weight of every single unsold ticket. It's the most anxiety inducing thing for me to go on tour.
I'm very, I feel like, come, don't come. I'd love you to be there, but don't fucking force yourself. If you're going to come to it, be willing. If you're going to buy a ticket to me and you're thinking, fucking stay at home. I want enthusiasm and people who want to be there. I don't want,
I'll just take your money, whatever. I'll win you over when you're in the room. Come on.
I don't want the ummers and the ahras. Go and fucking see something else.
They will, because they don't want to see a working class woman, Rachel.
Well, that is the other problem. Yeah, that is the issue. Go and see some fucking upper class clowning. You'd probably enjoy that.
No one enjoys that.
Fucking Philippe Gaulier. That man, I'll tell you what, that Gaulier, the clown school in France, Google it. That man, do you know what I like about him? He's fucking ripping these cunts off, and I really like it.
Yeah, Gaulier, yeah. Michael J. Dolan, brilliant comedian, refers to it as a pyramid scheme, because he's like, you can only make money as a clown by teaching other people to be clowns. He's like, it's literally a pyramid scheme that they've not cottoned onto yet.
Also, I imagine being a clown, like, isn't it something that organically happens? You can't be... look, I can't even get into it. I'm not discussing clowns at 8 in the morning. Nobody likes them. They're not funny. Just go and do something productive with your fucking time.
Thank you for listening.
I do appreciate everyone that listens, and I do appreciate everyone that comes to watch us and individually. But I'm not going to get on my knees and say thank you. It's a two-way thing.
I will.
Where's my thanks?
It's the ticket sale. That's literally your thanks.
Yeah, well,
We only get a tiny percentage of that anyway.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Genuinely thank you.
I mean, this is a weird time to talk about it, but I also think that, obviously, money's a crude thing to talk about, but I think they deliberately make it crude, so, working class people are silenced and often underpaid. But I think people think, when you buy a ticket, I think people think that comedians or the artists get more than they do. I remember, do you remember when we did the cow? We did 4 dates in the Purple Cow, and we worked it out for what we got. We got paid, so tickets are 15, 16, 17 quid, something like that. Mm-hmm. And we would get £1 from every one of those for the show. So yeah, we're getting about 1/15 of... So when you buy your ticket, do know that. You might feel I'm paying this much for this, but by the time everyone else has had their cut, often the comedian or the performer is having the smallest amount of it. That's shows that make profit, like ours. If there's shows that make a loss, some of those comedians will be paying for you to be sat in that room.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's how broken the system is, which is why it obviously favours people from wealthy families. So
I think as well, I've been thinking about this. So when I take my show on tour later in the year, I've just looked at venues and I'm like, I'm not doing that venue. People might think it's fucking cool and hip, but... I may as well bend over and be fucked up the arse by them.
Yeah, the split sometimes is appalling.
Because you're not, it's not beneficial to the performer.
Oh, I know which venue you mean. In London?
Yeah.
Yeah, I won't do it. I think it's a fucking racket. Yeah.
Yeah, and plus to add to that, I've never felt welcome there. At all. And I just feel there's better options, Yeah. I think there's a great... The audience doesn't give a shit where you're performing, really. If it's for other comedians to go, oh, they're doing that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, nobody cares. I'd rather do a gig in a venue that I feel happy in, that the audience are comfortable in, and that's it.
Where's
that's
that? A bin on a cobbled street?
A bin on a cobbled street in the rain with a bag of chips.
And the cat from Coronation Street wandering past.
The cat from Coronation Street. Oh my God, you've just brought my dream back to me. This is fucking insane.
Don't tell us about your dream.
But let me tell you, so I dreamt that I was in this really old graveyard. And then I came out thinking, and Ken Barlow was in a Coronation Street character for overseas listeners, soap character, was in a phone box having a seizure, and I was like, oh, Ken, are you all right, love? And then the next thing, I was living in a house with him and I was trying to resuscitate him. Fucking weird, isn't it?
Really weird. Really strange.
It mean? Nothing.
Yeah, it means that you're going to settle down with William Roach.
No, thank you.
That is the actor's name, just so you know. Just
no,
wanted to drop it in there because I knew
he's
it.
He's nearly 90, isn't he?
Is he?
Yeah.
Is he still doing the show?
He's still in it. I tell you what, though, he looks really good.
Yeah, he's been on telly since he's 18. You should look good.
Also, do you know I didn't know that Vladimir Putin was 69 years old?
Oh, he's had so much work done.
I know, but I actually
It's like
thought...
a fucking Kardashian.
I thought to myself, does he look bad or good?
He looks
I'm not
nothing.
talking-
He looks like he doesn't look like a human. That's sort of his skill.
Because I was looking at him going, I know he's had a bit of work done, but I don't think he looks 69. I think I had him pinned at mid-50s for some reason.
Well, there you go. He'll spare you when the revolution
He'll
comes.
spare me. But I will say this, he is the man that Cuban heels were invented for, isn't it?
Do you think all this would be over if he had a pair of Cuban heels?
I think so, yeah. It's funny because I can't remember, I said something about Vladimir Putin the other day. Like,
You're going to be late, you know.
I'll be all right. I said something about him the other day, and my boyfriend said, "Oh, well, you wouldn't tell him that to his face." I'm like, I fucking would.
I believe that you would, yeah.
What, do you think I'm going to kowtow to fucking Vladimir Putin? Like I wouldn't tell him he's a cunt to his face. I fucking would.
Normally, if people said this, I'm like, okay. But because of you, I'm like, yeah, I think you would call him a cunt, to be honest.
Well, yeah, I would. Like, what is this, you know? Listen, I'm a woman with nothing to lose anymore. It's like I've had some diagnosis, and I'm like, listen... I don't give a fucking shit anymore. Anyway,
I love that other people with a diagnosis would be kinder and you know, live every day like it's your last. And you're like, I'm going to fucking burn this place down with you inside. That's your attitude to every day as your last.
Absolutely. No prisoners. Truth's being dished out. That's what's going to happen. Anyway, we must go. But thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for listening. And we'll see you in Edinburgh on the 16th. Bye-bye.